My name is Gianpaolo Versace. I think most of you know me by now. I am account executive at Chase Office Interiors, and thank you so much for joining us in, already our second webinar of the season since we kicked it off again in September. Today, topic of our webinar is resistance to resilience. Make the shift. And this is a 45-minute presentation. And afterwards, we have, I think, about 10 minutes for some questions and answers. Please send them in the chat box whenever you feel like it, and we can address them towards the end. This is a CEU accredited presentation. And if you have given us your IDCEC number when you signed up, we'll process your credit in the next few business days. As I just mentioned, this is being recorded, and we'll make this available on our website in the next few business days on chaseoffice.ca events. And just shout out to Thad. He is the man who records, who edits, who posts it online. And he is also kind of like my my right hand, my wingman on this webinar. So thank you so much. We invite everybody to register also for our next CEU. I'm really excited about that one, actually. That's on November 17th, also again on a Thursday. And it's called Well Building Standard and How Floor Covering Impacts Health and Well-Being. So it's actually presented by Milliken. We really did want to kind of mix things up a little bit. We are not repping Milliken or anything, but we really felt that for the design community, this is a topic that we believe is of interest. And we really thought it was great to host kind of like people from different industries as well. And a topic, of course, well, is a huge thing. So originally today, we had Laura Lee from Teknion who was going to present to us. But Laura Lee, unfortunately, was not able to. She had a prior engagement. But I think we're very lucky. We have Annette from Teknion who has stepped in and is going to be leading this webinar. Annette has been in the design and office furniture industry for over 25 years. So she beats me there. She first worked as a designer and later for a manufacturer in sales. She has a design background and has a passion for the workplace. And that led her to workplace strategy, and that facilitates and engages customers on topics that include visioning, co-design, change planning, innovation, and workplace effectiveness. So Annette, this is now your show. I'm handing it over to you. So let's get going. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was going to say good afternoon. I guess it is good afternoon in Vancouver. I'm coming to you from New Jersey. I am with Teknion. I am the manager of workplace strategy. And a little bit of backstory to this CEU that I'm going to be presenting to you today. Laura Lee and I actually co-authored this together. We've been working on this for a while. We started having a conversation about a year ago during the course of the pandemic, and both of us were receiving a lot of requests about change management, specifically as it relates to how do you bring people back, because it really is a people challenge, isn't it? So it wasn't so much the questions we were being asked were not so much about how do you do it, rather, what is this about? Why is there such a resistance to change? So that really gave us the incentive to do a little bit of research and do a deep dive and come together and develop this curriculum for you today. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen with you. And if there are any issues, please do let me know. By the way, this is very much, as you know, pretty interactive. If you've done any CEUs with us before, we will be using the Menti platform. So I do invite you to please get your phones out and get ready for that. The first few slides really just have to do with IDCEC. So again, just please to reiterate, please let us have your IDCEC number, and then that you will be receiving your credits through that registration. So without further ado, here you have a QR code that you can either just put your phone up to, or if you prefer, you can also just log in on your phone to www.menti.com, and the enter code is indeed 6418662. Wonderful. So I've got a couple of people already on. 3. Yep. We're going to count how many people are there. I'm going to give folks a few minutes to, or a few seconds to log on. Now I see we have about 60 or around 20 people on the call. Some of you may be together in a room, which is quite possible. All right. 5, 7. Okay, I'm just going to give another minute or so. All right, so we will move on. If you are just logging on, that's fine. And there will be moments where if you don't mind having your camera on, that's helpful. Thumbs up, thumbs down. There might be some interaction that way too, visually, as we go through this. So let's start with Menti, getting used to Menti. Who's here? If you wouldn't mind just typing in your name, that would be wonderful. And that way we can know who's on board. Stephen's here, Jasmine, Angela, Mark, Suzanne, David, Julia, Ken, Teknion. I like that. Who from Teknion? I'd love to know who that is. Nick, Robin. Excellent. Well, thank you all. We've got 15 people in there. Wonderful. So let's talk about change. What if we could change how we feel about change, or at least how we react when we encounter it? And in doing so, become much more change adaptable. And that's what we're going to talk about together today. So take a look at this slide. What's your reaction when you read that? Let me ask you, do you know the same people that you knew when you were 15? No, probably not. Do you use the same cell phone that you used 10 years ago? Probably not either. Are you the same person that you were 5 years ago? We can guess the answer to that too. Of course not. All these things have changed. And indeed, as we certainly have experienced most recently, the world has changed. You've changed, I've changed. Together, we've learned new things, we've grown and we've been transformed. We've adapted and evolved, and we will continue to do that through our lives. As everything around us is always changing, as the saying goes, change is a constant. So what about this number? Isn't that terrifying? 70% of all change initiatives fail. If that's in fact true, it's a pretty big number to go up against when organizations are going through change. So think about that. 70% fail, but let's talk about a little bit of mindset here. That actually implies that 30% succeed. So what goes into that success? As human beings, when we hear that something that we know is going to be changing, it is rare that our first response is one of pure joy, especially when the change is initiated by someone else or something else. As I like to tell people, when we initiate change, it's fun and exciting. But when change happens to us, it's messy and it's really uncomfortable. So let's try something. We're going to get you guys engaged right from the get-go here. So first thing I'd like you to do is to cross your arms. Remember, I can see some of you. So please cross your arms. Okay, so you can guess what I'm going to ask you to do next. Cross them the other way. How does that feel? Does that feel comfortable? Nod yes, nod no. It feels awkward, doesn't it? So to your point, you've just experienced a little bit of change, and new experiences are in fact changes, and they can be uncomfortable, especially when they first occur. But for the most part, that feeling really doesn't last very long. So here is my question for you. How did it feel to change the position of your arms? If you could give me some responses, that'd be great. Confusing, absolutely. Different, weird, odd, yeah, uncomfortable, for sure. Yeah. Let's see what else we have here coming in. Forgot which side I like. Huh, that's interesting. Good, tricky, satisfied. That was a good answer. Yeah, so my challenge to you, quite honestly, is to do this 5 times today. And I guarantee by tonight, you'll be so much more comfortable. First of all, you have learned, your brain will have learned the new process. You won't have to think it out as much as you did a few minutes ago. And by the time it comes to the fifth time, it'll be easy to do. So we're going to, here's, if you will, our agenda for this afternoon. We'll start off by looking at why change is hard, how it's changed in its nature. We're going to ask you, I'm going to ask you how you feel about it. We're going to talk about the phases of change, and then teach you a little exercise that we call having, doing, feeling, and then address the importance of mindset. That you remember that 30% I talked about, the 30% of success, it really primarily has to do with mindset. And that's something that's really important. And then we're going to talk about opportunities, doors closed, doors open, and what to do when we are faced with change that's being thrust upon us. So why do you think that change is hard for people? So you can, all right, so let's see, we've got people are stubborn, people are not wired for change, doing it the way we know is easier, changing is stressful. Yep. See, we've got 11 people on here. Yes, so you know what? I think all of those answers are correct answers. But let's explore this question a little bit further. So why do we resist it so much? Very simply put, our brains are not built for it. Knowing why it is that humans often resist or avoid it, even the thought of change is helpful when we encounter it ourselves, and especially so when we are trying to help others in the face of change. Has that ever happened to you? It's happened to me. So for most of human history, life was largely predictable. The brain evolved to be remarkably good at recognizing patterns and building habits, turning very complex sets of behaviors into something we can do on autopilot. Hence, before you know it, you find yourself in the driveway on the way home from work. Given that habits and recognizable patterns are kind of the thing for our brain evolved to be uncertainty averse, if you will. Our adversity to change can be tied to our experiences as a species. Change was often dangerous for humankind and could pose a threat. Our safest course of action has generally been to return to the known. If there was a famine, for example, we wanted to get back to eating. If there was an invading army, we wanted to get back to peace and tranquility. If there was a plague, we wanted to get back to health or relative health. Certainly something we have all experienced with the pandemic. So you probably already know that when faced with threat, our natural inclination and reaction leads us to a fight, flight, or freeze response in our brains, which indeed does lead to decreases in motivation, focus, agility, cooperative behavior, self-control, sense of purpose, meaning, overall well-being, and even cognitive abilities. A sense of threat can also create significant impairments to our working memory. We can't hold on to as many ideas in our mind to solve problems, nor can we pull out as much information from our long-term memory than we usually can. Threats of uncertainty can really make us less capable, and we need to learn how we can deal with that, basically, because our brains were not evolved to do that. But there are ways that we can really build some resilience within ourselves to address that. Another thing that has really contributed to our ongoing discomfort with the thought around change is also that the nature of it has indeed changed. We don't have to look back all that far to see that the pace of change has changed drastically. Consider the TV, for example. It took almost 25 years from the time it was invented to becoming more commonplace in people's homes. From the time it was possible to broadcast in color, it took almost another 20 years before all daytime network shows were converted to broadcasting in color. That is amazing if you think about it. That gave us as a people a lot of time to adapt to changes. If you think about it today, when you go and do a download on your phone, there are probably more technological advances in that one download of software than they were in all those years in developing the television set. And as we say, We experience more change in a week than our ancestors might have in their entire lifetimes. So indeed, the pace of change has changed. It's not just the pace that has increased, but the amount that we are experiencing at any given time. And it's across all aspects of our lives. Whether the change is micro, like a professional level, or macro, like workplace or social change, it requires an investment of time, effort, and energy. Change is moving so much faster today, yet our capacity to keep up hasn't necessarily kept pace with this. This can all add up to what we call change fatigue. I love this image. I love this image of these little piggy banks. At any point, we each only have so many resources. Think about it. It's like your financial resources. You only have so much. Comes to time, you have only so much time available. Energy, attention, and interest that can be put toward the current projects and efforts that we face. Problems arise and we don't have a chance to build up our reserves or our capacity for change. We know that things will continue to change and that the pace of it will not be letting up for any time. For this reason, we all need to find ways to get more comfortable with it. As I said earlier, we're not naturally wired for constant change, but that does not mean that we are not unable to change that. So what's a human going to do? How can we revise this thousands of years in the making response to change? How do we manage all that change? Well, first, no pun intended, yet again, we must change. We can start certainly by learning how to increase our capacity for change, by gaining a better understanding of change, learning to shift our mindsets and manage how we see change. We can start to move from being change resistant to becoming much more change receptive and eventually change resilient. So it is indeed possible to rewire ourselves to think differently about it. But before we can think about others and before we can think about helping others through that process, we have to make sure that we're understanding of it, we're capable of it, and we have built up our own change capacities. So, how do you feel about it? Are you like the person on the left, or are you like that crowd on the right? So what I'd like to do is a nice little exercise with you. If you could give us 5 words that you associate with change. So just when somebody says change to you, no matter the context, what are the 5 things that come to your mind? If you have more than 5, feel free to add those too. Okay, excitement, dread, apprehension, discomfort, nerve-wracking, unsure, yeah. Curious, yes. Fresh, excitement, adventure, discomfort. So those of you who are giving me these answers about excitement and adventure, you're what I like to call my change champions. And when working with clients, oftentimes we're seeking those people out because we know if we can find out who our change champions are and we can engage them in a change process, they will really help us with the rest of the group and get them excited about the change at hand. So thoughtful, yes, making work projects, curiosity, wonderful. Yes, change needs to be purposely done, absolutely. There is a superpower associated with change. I like that. Wonderful. Well, here's some words I've got for you that when we did a poll. And these are some of the words others came up with. They came up with transformation. So if I say transformation, give me a thumbs up if you can find on our Zoom, send me a thumbs up, or if it's something that you find is not so nice, if there's a thumbs down, go for that. I know there's a thumbs up icon. I'm not sure if there's a thumbs down one. I'm just looking for that right now. Well, anyway, so the first one is, all right, let me just get rid of that. Fine. So you can even just, oh, there I see it. Thank you, Mark. I see your thumbs up. That's great. All right, how about this? Reorganization. How does that make you feel? Thumbs up or thumbs down? You can also do it this way with the camera. It's a lot easier. Typically, when we mention that word within a large organization, it's not good. It is something that people are scared of. But here's some other words that we often associate with change: conversion, fluctuation, adjustments, metamorphosis. That's a good and positive feeling. Reform, transition, transformation, and the list goes on. And you've come up with an extensive list of your own. So thank you for that. Fantastic. So now between our list and your list, we have a great collection of words. And we have already done the thumbs up, thumbs down. So I'm going to actually move on to the next slide. But the purpose of this exercise that we just went through is to show that we all have different perceptions of things, and how we experience things is impacted by our perceptions. So everyone experiences things in their own and unique ways. Life experiences and certainly do affect how we feel about change in general. If we've only encountered positive change, then we're clearly much more likely to be very positively minded about it. But let's look at some examples of things that have changed more recently. Let's take a short walk down memory lane, thinking back over the last 2.5 years. Certainly a lot has changed for us in our lives and in society. Close to everyone in the world was indeed affected by the pandemic and the change inflicted upon each and every one of us. Some things are pretty simple. Our dress codes for work have changed, certainly, becoming much more casual than ever before. And a survey of 500 white-collar workers across North America found that for many professionals, every day now feels like casual Friday. So in what other areas have you experienced some change? Maybe let's take an example of something from outside of work. Here's another example. Many of us, and I am guilty of the picture on the left-hand side, would come running home from work, grab my one child, drop it off at a sports practice, run to another location, pick up my other child. And by the time we were all done with after-school sports activities, there is little time left to go home and have a home-cooked meal. Or sometimes there's overlap. It really did require us literally eating in the car. What is very interesting is during, of course, the pandemic, is that we were all forced to go into lockdown. One of the positive changes that came out of it, however, was that people found that they had time to convene over the dinner table every night as a family. We know that in August of 2020, a consumer trends survey noted that people were having many more family meals together, both in person and virtually. Of those who were surveyed, over 70% said that it was the highlight of their day, a time they were looking forward to, and quite frankly, a newfound tradition or habit, if you will, that they really wanted to hold on to. And certainly as we are transitioning people back to the office, we are hearing this more and more. People are really valuing those things and they don't want to give them up every day of the week. So let's consider things that have changed for you personally over the past few years. What is something that has changed for you recently? So if you wouldn't mind entering that on Menti. A lot more working from home, absolutely. The commute, or the lack thereof, perhaps, or less. Going to the gym less, that's really interesting. A new job and working from home, children moving out, yes. Spending a lot more time at home, more time for fitness, cooking more, eating at home a lot more personal time. Yeah, more time to be at home, yeah. It's no wonder that residential sales took off during the pandemic. All of a sudden, we were forced to look at our homes and realize there were things we wanted to do. A lot of people started fixing up and doing all kinds of things at home. All right, higher awareness of personal health, absolutely. No real end to the workday and time. I hear you on that. I've always said it takes great discipline to be a remote worker, and not in the way most people think when I say that. It's the discipline to know when to stop working. It's too easy to keep going, isn't it? I no longer color my hair. I grew my eyebrows, wear high heels. Yes, I'm baking more bread. Absolutely. These are all great things, and things we have also all experienced, I think, in one degree to another. So thank you for those answers. So let's talk about when we have change that comes upon us. There are two ways for us to react. We can either have a positive reaction to the change, and that's often a change that we've initiated ourselves, or something that's an opportunity that's really positive. For example, an opportunity we don't want to miss out on. Those are positive reasons for change. Moving to a new house, moving to a new office space, those are positive things. And but we know that somewhere along the line, even though it is a positive change, we are going to encounter some resistance. If you've gone to any change management courses, most business schools will always refer to getting married as an example for this. However, we're going to stick to the world that we know, and we're going to talk about it within the context of furniture and office and design. So there are indeed 5 phases in the positive resistance to change. The first one is what we call uninformed optimism. Oh my gosh, we're getting a new space. I'm so excited. Our current space certainly is not what we want to be in. The second one is we then transition slowly into what we call informed pessimism. What do you mean it's going to be open plan? That brings on a lot of questions and anxiety. At that point, excuse me, people start talking. As I like to say, that's when the rumor mill starts. Did you hear? Oh my gosh, it's only going to be benching all the way across the floor plate. People start talking. And at that point, there's a lot of talk going on, but also the more talk there is, it's not a good thing. And there is talk that's taking place publicly, but there's also people are having thoughts that they are not necessarily voicing that are private. Now, from an organizational standpoint, as you can well imagine, the public ones are fine because they can be addressed. If they're being voiced, they're being addressed. However, the ones that are not being addressed, that are private, are the most dangerous, because eventually those people, what they're going to do is, if they don't voice their concerns, and if their concerns are not addressed, eventually they're going to detach themselves and start checking out. That's what we call checking out from it. And that's where we risk losing people. We've all heard about the Great Resignation. Perhaps this is one reason, one of the causes of that. The next phase is what we call hopeful realism. So hopefully the concerns have indeed been addressed, those public ones. And if the private ones have not been drawn out, and that's what we do in change management, we want to get in there and talk to people and draw out those concerns so that we can get everything flushed open out and into the open. Then once people are learning more about the situation, they enter hopeful realism. Will there be more options of where to work throughout the day, for example? Then we move on to phase 4, which we call informed optimism. We get new mobile technology and reliable Wi-Fi. Yay! So guess what? Now we're starting to see the positive aspects of this change. What am I going to get out of it? That is ultimately the question that everybody asks of themselves when they're confronted with change. What does this mean for me? That's our first reaction. And then finally, phase 5 is what we call completion. I love getting to choose where I can go to do my best work for the task at hand. So that is the first approach to it, to change or reaction in face of positive change. But change is intensely personal, and each individual will think, feel, or do something at each stage. It's important to remember that those around you will have had their own experiences and context for their feelings about change as well. So we just looked at what we go through, and the change we have experienced is something that we think is needed and wanted. Imagine then what happens when we come up against a change that we do not want to happen and are resisting. It can really be a roller coaster of emotions. So the first step is shock and denial. We may not want to believe what's happening and that it is happening to us, and we need some time to digest it. After the initial shock wears off, we may experience denial and may remain focused on the past. It can bring about a dip in our productivity and our ability to think and act. Think back to the fight, flight, or flee, right? Slow and gradual communication and opportunities to ask questions is helpful at this time. Knowing why the change is happening and how it will be helpful can help move people through this particular stage. The next stage is what we call mild anger. We maybe can begin to feel fear from what lies ahead of us. And this may also turn into anger and resentment. Knowing that we need to learn, change, and adapt may make us very angry. This is a natural reaction, but we can get mired here, especially if we have lots of like-minded people around us. This is very dangerous, especially for that organization. That's why we always want to seek out those change champions, because they will help us really get everyone else excited about it. The more conscious we are about this specific stage, the quicker it will be for us to pass on and make way for us to finally be accepting of our situation or of the change. The next phase is what we call detachment. We may be starting to think about ways to postpone the inevitable and try to find out the best thing left in the situation. Or we may bury our heads in the sand completely. We then move on to dialogue and understanding. Learning, this is a learning phase, and sometimes it can be very uncomfortable and difficult. There can be low energies due to low morale and excitement. It can help if the training is interesting or made to look fun. So that's where we really want to get people on board and get them engaged again and get them moving towards excitement. And then lastly, well, not second to last, I should say, we get to the acceptance phase. We finally begin to embrace the change, accept the situation, and start building new hopes and aspirations. While some may do so because of lack of any other option, others will accept the new reality in a very positive manner. And finally, we end at the very end of the process, which we call transformation. The change has occurred and we are successfully moving forward with our new way. We feel empowered, we feel safe, we have a higher feeling of self-esteem, and we have found meaning in what this change that happened to us. One of the best examples of this graph that you just saw, and I'm sure many of you are thinking, this looks familiar. Well, it is the Kubler-Ross change curve. And it is also very similar to the 5 stages of grief. And here's an example, and the example is really the dead car battery. This gives us a clear demonstration of the process that we go through. So just imagine for a second, it's a chilly winter morning and it's dark. There's a thin layer of frost on the ground, but you are late for work and you have to rush out to get the car. As you place the key in the ignition and turn on the car, you realize that the battery is dead. What follows is a clear demonstration of the Kubler-Ross transition stages. First, shock and denial. Your first reaction is absolute shock and denial. You cannot believe this is happening to you when you're already running late, and you thus try to start the car again and again and again. Now that frustration is going to turn into anger. Now that you realize that the car cannot be started, you begin to feel angry and very angry at the situation. This is where we start bargaining with ourselves. Even though it won't help, you start asking the car to start just for this once. I've been there, or the printer that's jammed. Please, printer, just work just this once. You promise it in your mind that you will keep it and maintain it and get the battery changed as soon as possible. The next stage is depression. All the negative thoughts start rushing into your mind. You begin to feel depressed, sad, and hopeless. You fear your job will be taken away because you'll be late yet again, and you don't see any way out of the situation. Then finally, acceptance. Now you figure out what you need to do next. You put a plan in place. You can grab a cab and then decide to deal with the situation later on. You've resolved the problem and are ready to move on. So thinking of change, for change in the past 2 to 3 years, would you say what you experience is change on the negative curve or on the roller coaster? Yeah, we have one roller coaster. So it's an even split. Okay. Yeah. So it's looking like we're going to have almost a 50-50 response here, a little bit more on the roller coaster side, on the Kubler-Ross side. Yeah. Looks like Kubler-Ross is going to win the day today. But yes, we've all experienced both types of change, haven't we? So an integral part for assuring the success of change management program is to address individual attitudes towards change. One must meet them where they are in order to identify mindset and help people reframe their ideas. This exercise, which we call having, doing, feeling, is an easy and quick way to engage people and get a sense of how they are feeling about an upcoming change. I'll describe to you how we employ this. First thing we do is ask them, what do they have? What do they want to get out of the change? So what are they doing now? What do they want to be doing as a result of the change? How do they feel about change? How do they want to feel about change afterwards? What would you have? What would you be doing? How would you feel? Even though this is a good exercise to use with change is working within the framework. So it's something I really encourage you to do at any opportunity, quite frankly. Now, it's good enough to get this information, both folks, but you have to do something with the information. So it's not enough just to ask them the questions. You need to follow through on that. So I would say, basically, make sure you take that information, use it. It'll give you a roadmap of what to do next. And also it's going to identify areas where you're really going to want to have to focus on change. And most of all, what you want to do is use the information that you're collecting to help those individuals and help change their mindsets if they are indeed feeling apprehensive and fearful of the change that's the impending change. Which brings us now to mindset. So what is mindset? It's a mental attitude or inclination and a fixed state of minds. Once we know where people are and what they are feeling, including ourselves, we are far more able to help them move through this change process. We want to challenge people's perspectives and perceptions and help them approach change with the right mindset. As we're not wired necessarily for this, because our instinct to change is to respond negatively, a negative mindset could easily set in. So we need to be able to turn that on its head and really think about that and understand that if we can switch our mindset, we can really influence the outcome of change. Here's an example. You may have heard of this story from Benjamin Zander's book, The Art of Possibility, on the importance of mindset. A shoe factory sends 2 marketing scouts to a far-off land, and this is a true story, by the way. It took place at the beginning of the 1900s, to study the prospects for expanding their business. Once they arrived in that location, one sends back a telegram saying, "Situation hopeless, stop. No one wears shoes." The other writes back triumphantly saying, "Glorious business opportunity, stop. They have no shoes." This story illustrates how reframing a challenge and having a positive mindset can impact a situation. So who do you think had the greater success? Situation hopeless or glorious business opportunity? Yeah. So the observation that no one wore shoes meant that they don't need them, so there would be no sales to be had. That was certainly the one way of looking at it. However, the other who saw that they weren't wearing them realized there was a wonderful opportunity because obviously nobody was supplying shoes to that market. So what is interesting about mindset is just how powerful it is. In the book Beyond Performance, John Wiley and Sons, research showed that executives at companies that took the time and trouble to address mindset were 4 times more likely than those that didn't address it to rate their change programs as at least successful. There were 0 reports of success from executives that did not address mindset. The authors cite that the lack of attention on shifting mindsets is the biggest block to successful transformation. So let's go back to that 70%. As I tell people, let's not focus on the 70, let's focus on the 30, because it really does come down to mindset. Another way of looking at it is the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. Changing our mindset requires us to challenge our perspectives. We need to shift from autopilot and look objectively at what is happening both within ourselves and the situations we are faced with. The classic example, of course, is the glass half full versus the glass is half empty. Focusing on the glass is half full gives us optimism, and we're looking for the positivity. And I think it's very important to note that optimism does not make the person foolish or naive. It just means that they're looking at it through a specific lens. They see the reality of the situation. After all, looking at these two glasses, they have the same amount of water in them, but just looking at them and saying half full within yourself, don't you have a different reaction than when you say, oh, it's half empty? I mean, even one's voice changes. It's interesting, but it just is really illustrative of how important mindset is. A growth mindset assures that we are likelier to succeed at change. Still, though, that's just not enough. Part of having a growth mindset is to take on an honest and objective view of the situations we face. It is indeed the time to dig in and see the challenge in its entirety, not just at the surface level. Let's take a look at the iceberg. What we see above the surface is only 10% of the reality, but we know that 90% of the mass lurks below the surface. Consider our own lives. So often we focus on our own 10%, that these might be for successful results or failures. You might have landed the job of your dreams, or we may have even failed at an exam. But if we wonder about, oh my gosh, if I failed at the exam, why is that? We have to take a good look at the 90% that lies underneath. Perhaps we didn't put the time and preparation into it. And at that point, we have to wonder, what's the point of studying anymore if we're not going to be able to pass the exam? Well, mindset comes in exactly here. It's to take a look at that, what lurked underneath the surface of the water, to dig in, start studying, knuckling down, and changing our mindset so that we frame ourselves for success. There are so many things that we can do to become more change capable. We started here today just by becoming more aware of what might be making us resistant to change in the first place. Recognizing that we need to question how we are feeling about change, challenge our beliefs, and focus on our mindset. We are going to leave you today with one final exercise, and this one is about being reflective. It's called Doors Closed, Doors Open. The goal of this exercise is twofold. First, it is to acknowledge that the end of one thing is also the beginning of something new. Second is to bring awareness to those things that may be barriers to adapting a more optimistic outlook when doors close. The end of something positive is not only negative, but can also create room for something positive again. It doesn't negate the negative, but draws our attention to focusing on the positive that actually exists. This exercise helps us make a shift in perspective from focusing on what is not anymore to seeing the potential of the future and develop a more positive outlook for the future. So very simply, I'm going to walk you through this. We're not asking anybody to post any answers or anything, but just think about this. Think of a time in your life you missed out on something important, or when a big plan collapsed, a point in your life where a door closed. What led to that door closing? So don't spend too much time rehashing or going over the event. Just bring it to mind. That said, this exercise purpose is not to downplay the negative event. So it's important to acknowledge the emotions, the pain and the heartache you experienced. However, the point is not to hold on to them. We want to acknowledge them, but then we want to let go. The next part is then to think about what happened afterwards. What happened afterwards? What helped you open the new door? How long did it take you to realize that a new door was open? Was it easy or hard for you to realize that a new door was open? What prevented you from seeing the new door open? What can you do next time when you're in a similar situation to recognize the new opportunity sooner? What were the effects of the door closing on you? Did it last that long? At the time, we all think things are never going to end, but they do eventually come to an end. Did the experience bring anything positive to you? What does a closed door represent to you now? Is it something negative, or is it an opportunity for growth and transformation? So optimism, if we think about it, is just like a muscle, and you can build on it. When changes happen, we will be less likely to let circumstances overwhelm us and quicker to engage in solution-focused actions, knowing that our behavior matters, especially in the face of challenges. Research has shown that being more optimistic can also propel you forward in other ways. Optimists do better over the course of their careers. They may make more money and are more likely to be promoted. Visionary work optimists, those that are in the top quartile for optimism are compared to their peers, are 40% more likely to get a promotion over the next year, not to mention 6 times more likely to be highly engaged at work and 5 times less likely to burn out than their peers or than pessimists. So how we choose to set our sail makes all the difference indeed. Sailors know that what guides them to their destination is how they choose to set their sails. Instead of resisting or letting winds blow them in any which way, as the seas and weather change, they must constantly reset their sails, leaning into the wind and using its force to propel them along their way. Our capacity to adapt to and ultimately be more resilient to the turning tides of change all comes down to how we choose to perceive the situation we are faced with. When we recognize our emotions, pause, and have time to process them, we are then in a better place to be able to adjust our mindset to what is needed to ensure our success. We have a capacity to influence how we see a situation, how we think, and how we respond. Basically, how we can choose to set our sail. It doesn't look like we're ever going to return to a time when everything is mostly status quo. We no longer have the luxury of relying on our impulse towards homeostasis and staying with what's worked in the past. Having the ability to accept and respond well to necessary change will become more important with every passing day in this era of nonstop change. Hopefully, we have helped demonstrate today that we can work at becoming more capable by rewiring what we think and how we feel when we encounter change. We can shift from being resistant to being resilient. And that is our topic for today. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Annette. I have been kind of looking in the chat. I don't think there are really any questions there. I have to admit, I wanted to interrupt you like 100 times just to clarify or comment. And, the most important thing I wanted to ask, obviously the topic today was really focused on how as an individual, you can sort of change your mindset. But if we're going if we have our clients, have organizations going through change, and you can get negative responses. You very often also deal with apathy. Yeah, whatever. Yep. We've done this before and it didn't work. So how as an organization do you change the mindset of your employees?
That's a great question. So I think when we're looking at organizational change, there are 2 aspects we need to look at. There's the project management side of things, and we all understand what that means, right? That's the technical aspect of change. It's the design aspect. It's that whole schematic part. It's the scheduling. It's just the nuts and bolts. But that's not enough, to your point. We need to deal with the people. So the people aspect of change is what we call change management. And change management as a discipline is fairly recent, actually. It's only really come about in the last 30 years or so. So before we can move that organization through that, in order to be successful, we have to have both. We have to have the technical along with the human aspect to ensure success. But before you can look at moving a group of people through organizational change, you need to address the individual. If you don't address the individual, you don't stand a chance of getting the group through. So to your point, yes, that's why we want to engage people in the process. It's of primary importance when there is change afoot to engage people, get them involved. I think the biggest criticism we hear from people, as I'm sure you have too, is we don't know what's going on. One needs to be incredibly communicative about the change. And I think it's also about making it very clear, what are the reasons for change? It's acknowledging, yes, we're going through the change. What are the reasons for it? Spell them out. You know, the lease is up, or no, we found a better location. We need to be clear on that. The next thing is to let people know, because again, it goes back to what's in it for me is the very first question most people will ask. You know, they may not voice it, but it's what they're thinking. What's in it for me? Am I going to lose something, or am I going to gain something out of this? So again, it's addressing, what are they going to get? How are they going to benefit from this change? Now, not every change, as we know, when we go through change, there's always a little bit of, you're having to give up something to get something else. So I think it's very also of great importance to call that out. Here's what you're getting. Yes, there are some trade-offs. You may be losing this, but you're getting that. So again, it's being honest, open, being very transparent about what's going on. And then lastly, to just say, you know, this is our plan. There's a timeline associated. There is also a reminder, again, of why we're doing this. And I think the most important thing is to educate people along those lines as to what it is. We know that when we ask folks, you know, when they're faced with change, what are the 3 things that come up when reactions? Typically, the first thing is people think they're going to lose their jobs. So again, what's in it for me is the first reaction. The second thing, interestingly enough, is their second concern is, what am I going to have to learn? There's this concern that I'm going to have to learn a new way of work, a new way of doing things, a new computer program, whatever that may be. And interestingly, about a thing about that aspect of it, it has nothing to do about what generation you are. It's just a human reaction. What am I going to learn? Because change requires changing our behavior, learning new behaviors. And then lastly, of course, financially, what does that mean for me as an individual and also as an organization? What is the cost of change? So again, it's this idea of engaging people as soon as you possibly can and really flushing out their fears and address the elephant in the room. I just took over a group of people through change process workshops a few weeks ago. And, you know, this was a group of people, they had all been sitting and used to working in private offices, and they're moving into a new space where it's a completely new layout. And they were coming in, and you could tell from their body language, arms crossed and, you know, anger. And you could tell they're saying, I bet she's not going to talk about the fact that we're going to open plan. And the first thing I did was, guess what? Yeah, this is where you're going. Let's talk about it. We flushed it out. I asked them specifically, what are your fears? What are you fearful about? And then also to remind them the things that aren't going to change. Their team isn't going to change. Their boss isn't going to change. The organization's not going to change, and reassuring people through that process. So forgive me, that was a much longer answer than you probably were looking for, but.
Yeah. Well, I think you sort of answered Amran's question as well, because he was asking, you know, do you involve all parties, and, you know, is it all about communication, which you kind of answered.
Yeah.
Yes, you do involve all parties, right? And it is very much about communicating. If I got that correctly. What I'm wondering, when you were talking earlier in your conversation or in your presentation about people getting tired of change. Now that is, if people are tired,
yeah,
they're really checked out. So you have to re-energize them. Is change sometimes maybe done better? Because sometimes organizations get all carried away. Is it sometimes better maybe if it's done incrementally, if it's more organic, more subtle?
I think you have to be, so I think that takes Organic is great, but that does also require planning. You have to plan for change, regardless. So it may
Regardless,
look organic and seamless, but it needs to be planned for.
yeah. No, that's a very good point. I see we are at 5 minutes to the hour, so I just wanted to see. Don't see any further questions showing up. If anyone feels like speaking up, by all means.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your voices. I'm tired of hearing mine.
Just trying to give people a chance to say something. Don't be shy. Because as I said, I can go on forever. I think this is a fascinating topic.
No, I just want to say thank you very much, Annette. This is a very, very relevant topic because I think to GP's point, Gianpaolo's point, that change is one of those words that's been going on for the last few years, and it can become exhaustive. But I think it's the biggest point is having a different mindset around it and just being, I guess, just ready for the change. And obviously, the biggest piece sometimes we forget are there are people involved in the change. So you do have to have that aspect of communication and keeping everyone informed. The last accepted piece of change is when it's a surprise. No one wants that. So
change happening to us is not a fun thing.
No,
I say there are 3 methods of change. There's the tell it method, which is they get an email on Friday telling them to report to a new office on Monday. There's the sell it method where we tell them, guess what? We just got a new space. We're going to be moving there in about a year. And you engage them in a lot of conversation, early on, and then they don't hear from you again. And then next thing you know, they get that email saying, show up on Monday in the new space. So that's what we call the sell it method. So you know what, you've engaged them on front end, but you got to sure sell them on the back end, right? Once they're moved in, there's going to be a lot of work to be covered. And then finally, there's the third method, which we love to call the engage method. Engage them up front, engage them throughout the entire process. And once you get them to that point, and that really speaks to your point, Gianpaolo, about something that seems organic and natural. If you engage and continue with that engagement all the way through that process, you are going to get to the point where once they've moved in, it's really just an afterthought. It's like, yay, we're here, great.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest acceptance, right? When it actually seems all just, well, it made perfect sense for people, and that they realize maybe also, because I think a lot of people will look at change just like, well, what's in it for me?
Oh, it's totally about that, right?
Like it's very often, I think in organizations, people get the feeling, well, you're just doing it to save money.
Yeah.
And that's and that's obviously a lot else gets maybe lost because it's not communicated clearly. It's not just about that. It's everything else is changing around us too.
It's also a wonderful opportunity to strengthen your culture, quite honestly. Make everybody involved, give everybody a piece of that so they can get excited about it, build the momentum. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's not easy. It's messy. It's hard. Yeah. It requires a lot of work, but the outcome is well worth it. And I think one of the things all of us struggle with is, yes, we want to be transparent, but we can't always share everything. So there needs to be also that understanding that, information is shared in due time.
When it's, yes, exactly, right?
Exactly.
When for milestones or when it's relevant. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's incredibly important is to celebrate change and success of change. Celebrate the milestones, celebrate what you're doing, get people involved in that way too. So it's not everything, it's not about change happening to them, it's about change that we're doing this together.
Well, thank you so much. This is really fascinating. I see it is now 1 minute to 1 o'clock. I want to thank you so much for presenting to us and the team. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We'll be sending out a survey and always want to learn from our attendees if there's any specific topics you would like to see in the future, so we can take that into account when we set up a future webinars and CEUs. Again, just wanted to remind everybody we will have our next CEU on November 17th. Where our friends from Milliken will be presenting Well Building Standard and How Floor Covering Impacts Health and Well-Being. Okay, that was a mouthful. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon. And if anyone is curious to learn more I think everybody has my contact information, or contact Chase, and we'll be more than happy to get Annette involved.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. It's good to see you all.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Have a great one. Thanks, everybody.